Alright, so I never thought I'd be one of those people posting on here, but I seriously don't know what to do. I'm 26M, and my life just exploded in the worst way possible. I found out my mom has a secret second family. Not an affair, not some side fling, a whole ass second life with a different husband and kids. And the worst part? I don't know if I should tell my dad. I know how Reddit works. Half of you are already typing. Tell him immediately, he deserves to know. And I get it. But just hear me out before you grab your pitchforks. This all started a few days ago. My mom, 48F, asked me to help her set up a new phone. She's terrible with tech, so I was transferring her data while she made us tea. It was completely normal, until a notification popped up from some guy named David Redhart. Weird. My dad's name is Greg. Before I could even process that, another text came in. Hey, are you coming over later? The kids miss you. I physically flinched when I read that. Kids. The hell was this? Now, let me clarify something. I'm not one of those paranoid sons who thinks their mom is some perfect angel. I know people have secrets. I even know some dads cheat, and some moms do too. But this was different. This wasn't some sketchy, flirty coworker situation. This was a whole-ass family. My heart started pounding, and before I even thought about what I was doing, I clicked on the messages. And that's when my world collapsed. There were years of texts. Years. Conversations about their date nights, their anniversaries, their family trips. There were pictures. Dozens of them. My mom standing next to some dude I'd never seen before. Laughing with him. Sitting at a dinner table with two little boys. She looked happy. Not like she was hiding something. Like this was her life. I sat there, scrolling through this nightmare, my stomach twisting into knots. My mom had a 10-year-old son with this guy. Which meant, she didn't just cheat. She's been living a double life for at least a decade. I was still frozen, my brain not catching up to my eyes, when I heard footsteps. I barely had time to lock the phone before my mom walked into the room. She saw my face, saw the phone, and I watched as the color drained from her face. For a second, there was just silence. Then she whispered, "Oh my God." And that's when I knew, she knew exactly what I had just seen. I'm not proud of what happened next. I wish I could say I stayed calm, asked rational questions, and got the full story like some detective in a crime show. But nope. My entire nervous system shut down, and my mouth started moving before my brain could catch up. Who the FK is David? My mom flinched like I'd slapped her. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then swallowed hard like she was trying to think of a way out of this. Spoiler. There wasn't one. Listen, honey, she started, her voice shaking. It's not what you think. Classic cheater response. As if I hadn't just seen the evidence myself. Not what I think. Oh, okay, so you don't have another husband and two secret kids? That's a relief, Mom. She winced again. And that's when I realized, she wasn't going to deny it. No fake excuses. No, oh, that's just an old friend. She knew she was caught. So she sighed, sat down at the kitchen table, and said the words that officially ruined my entire existence. I need you to listen to me before you say anything to your father. Not, this is a misunderstanding. Not, let me explain. Nope. Just a damage control request. I sat across from her, arms crossed, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Start talking. And holy *T, did she talk. She met David 15 years ago. Apparently, she and my dad were going through a rough patch, translation. She wanted attention. She swears she never meant for it to turn into anything serious, but one thing led to another, and bam. Suddenly, she was juggling two lives. Instead of choosing between my dad and David, she just never made a choice. She kept both. Built two separate lives, two homes, two families. My dad got weekdays and family holidays, and David got weekends and vacations. You have to understand, she kept saying, I love both of them. That's when I laughed. Not a happy laugh. A what the hell am I hearing laugh? Oh, of course. You love them both. That totally makes it okay, Mom. I'll just call Dad right now and tell him how lucky he is to share you. She grabbed my hand so fast I actually jerked back. Please, she begged. You can't tell him. You don't understand how complicated this is. Complicated? No, Mom, nuclear physics is complicated. This is just get up. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel bad. How could I? She had been lying to my entire family for 15 years. But then, she dropped another bombshell. David doesn't know either. I froze. Wait. What? She wiped her eyes, looking exhausted. He thinks your dad left years ago. He thinks we're together full-time. I just sat there, trying to process the absolute psychological horror show I had been born into. My mom had been lying to everyone. My dad had no idea he had a wife who was also a wife somewhere else. David had no idea his partner already had a husband. And my two half-brothers had no clue they had an older brother they'd never met. I felt physically sick. And yet, my mom still had the audacity to beg me not to tell anyone. I need time to figure this out, she whispered. Just, please, don't ruin everything. Ruin everything. Mom, you already did that. So now, here's my question to you guys. What the hell am I supposed to do? I didn't sleep that night. My brain wouldn't shut up. I kept replaying everything. The messages, the photos, my mom's face when she realized she was caught. And now, she expected me to just keep quiet? Like this wasn't the biggest betrayal imaginable? The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, and there she was, drinking coffee like nothing happened. She looked up at me, hopeful. Like maybe I'd magically forget she was a professional level liar. I sat down, arms crossed. So, what's the plan? She sighed. I just need time to figure out how to handle this. I scoffed. You had 15 years to figure this out. Her face twisted, but I wasn't about to feel bad for her. I know you're angry, she whispered. No, Mom. Angry is when someone takes the last slice of pizza. This is rage. She swallowed hard. I could see her brain working, trying to find an angle, an excuse, something to make me feel like she wasn't a complete monster. But there was nothing. Then, a horrifying thought hit me. Are there more? She blinked. What? I gestured vaguely. More husbands. More families. Is there a third set of kids out there waiting to find out their mom is a compulsive liar? She looked genuinely offended. That's not funny. I'm not laughing. She exhaled, rubbing her temples. It's just David and your father. And you. The afterthought. I pushed my chair back, standing up. I can't sit here and pretend this is normal. She grabbed my wrist. Please. Let me fix this before you say anything. And that's when it hit me. She actually thought she could fix this. That she could somehow juggle two husbands, two families, and just make it work. She saw my expression and hesitated. If I just... No, I cut her off. You either end it with Dad, or you end it with David. But one way or another, someone's getting the truth. She went pale. Is that a threat? I stared at her. It's reality. Her fingers trembled against my wrist before she let go. She knew she was losing control. Good. She should be scared. Because I wasn't keeping my mouth shut forever. I avoided her for the rest of the day. I wasn't in the mood to hear more excuses, more pathetic attempts to justify what she had done. I needed space, time to process. But by the next morning, I had made a decision. If she didn't tell my dad soon, I would. I just didn't know how to do it. How do you sit down with someone and say, hey, your wife has been married to another guy for over a decade? How do you destroy someone's entire life in one conversation? I spent the whole morning debating it before finally grabbing my keys and heading out. I needed air. Needed to think. But before I even made it to my car, I heard her voice behind me. Where are you going? I turned. Out. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She looked tired, desperate. To see your father? I didn't answer. She took a shaky breath. Just, please give me more time. I laughed, shaking my head. How much more do you need? Another decade. Her face twisted. I don't want to hurt him. I stepped closer. Mom, you already did. You just haven't told him yet. Her hands clenched at her sides. You think it's that simple? Yes, I said flatly. You tell the truth. You deal with the consequences. You don't get to keep lying because it's convenient for you. She swallowed hard, looking down. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then she looked back up at me, and what she said next made my blood go cold. You don't understand, sweetheart. If your father finds out, I don't know what he'll do. Something about the way she said it, quiet, careful, made me freeze. What do you mean? She hesitated. He's not stable. He never has been. If he finds out about this, I don't know if he'll handle it well. I narrowed my eyes. Are you saying he'd hurt you? She shook her head quickly. No. Not me. But himself. Maybe. I stared at her, trying to figure out if this was real concern or just another manipulation tactic. Was my dad the type to hurt himself? I had never seen any signs. But what if I was wrong? For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt doubt. Maybe telling him wasn't as simple as I thought. I didn't leave. Not because I wanted to stay, but because my mom's words got to me. Was she just trying to manipulate me, or was there truth in what she said? Could my dad really do something to himself if he found out? I hated that I was even considering it. She saw the hesitation on my face and pressed harder. You know how he gets. He bottles things up. If this breaks him, she trailed off, shaking her head. I don't want that on my conscience. But you want it on mine. I didn't say it out loud, but she could probably see it on my face. I was trapped. If I told him and he spiraled, she'd blame me. If I kept quiet, I'd be part of this lie. Either way, I lost. I exhaled, pinching the bridge of my nose. So what do you want me to do? She stepped closer. Just give me a chance to do it my way. Let me tell him when I think he can handle it. My stomach churned. Her way. Right. Because she had handled everything so well up to this point. But the alternative was worse. If I told him, and something bad happened, I don't think I could live with that. I clenched my jaw. Fine. You have 1 week. Her shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. Don't thank me, I muttered. I don't trust you. I'm just giving you a chance to prove me wrong. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't like that answer. I turned and went back inside, hating every second of this. For the next few days, I barely spoke to her. Every time we crossed paths, I could feel her watching me, like she was scared I'd change my mind. And maybe I should have. Because by day 5, I realized something. She wasn't planning on telling him. She never was. I overheard her on the phone with David, laughing like nothing was wrong. Making weekend plans. Talking about their next family trip. That's when I knew. She was stalling. Hoping I'd just let it go. I wasn't going to. So I made a decision. If she wasn't going to tell him, I would. But I wasn't going to do it alone. I needed backup. Someone who wouldn't try to manipulate me. Someone who would tell me if I was making a mistake. So I grabbed my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and called the one person I knew I could trust. My aunt. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, kiddo. What's up? I took a deep breath. You're gonna want to sit down for this. My aunt didn't sit down. At least, not at first. I barely got through the first sentence before she cut me off. Wait. What? So I told her everything. The messages. The pictures. The fact that my mom had been juggling 2 husbands for over a decade. That I had 2 half-brothers I'd never met. That she was stalling and had no real intention of telling my dad. She didn't say a word while I talked. Just silence on the other end of the line. Then, when I finally finished, she exhaled sharply and said, well, that's some serious soap opera level **T. No kidding. Are you sure? She asked. Like, 100% sure? I saw the messages myself, I said. I confronted her. She admitted it. Another pause. Then, in a much colder tone, she said, and you're telling me Greg, my brother, has no idea? No clue. I heard movement, like she was pacing. When she spoke again, she sounded pissed. That be *TCH. I'd never heard my aunt talk like that. Ever. She had always been the fun, cool aunt. The one who snuck me candy when my mom wasn't looking. The one who made inappropriate jokes at family dinners. But now, she sounded furious. She really thought she could get away with this, she muttered. For how long? Forever. She thinks she still can, I admitted. She told me Dad wouldn't handle it well if he found out. That he might, you know. Silence. Then, **T. I blinked. You don't think he would? No, she snapped. Your dad's been through tough **T before. He's not weak. But you know who is. Your mother. She's scared. Not for him. For herself. I felt something in my chest tighten. I had been so wrapped up in guilt, so afraid of what might happen if I told my dad, that I didn't stop to consider the obvious. My mom wasn't protecting him. She was protecting herself. I sat down heavily. So what do? We tell him. My aunt's voice was steel. Together. I swallowed hard. You sure? Positive. She hesitated. But you need to be ready. Because once this comes out, there's no going back. I already knew that. But hearing her say it made it feel real. Once I did this, my family, asterisk as I knew it, asterisk would be over. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said, let's do it. This is it. No more waiting. No more lies. Tomorrow, my dad learns the truth. Am I making a mistake? Or is this the only way? The next day felt unreal. I was on autopilot, going through the motions, knowing that by the end of it, my entire family would be unrecognizable. My aunt picked me up in the afternoon. She barely said a word, just gave me a sharp nod and started driving. I could see it in her face. This wasn't a discussion anymore. We were doing this. My dad was home when we got there, sitting on the couch, half watching some crime show. He looked up, surprised to see both of us. Hey, what's going on? I opened my mouth, but my aunt beat me to it. Greg, we need to talk. I had never seen my dad look nervous before, but he did then. He sat up straighter, glancing between us. What's wrong? I felt my stomach twist. My hands were clammy. My pulse was in my ears. I couldn't do it. I knew I had to, but the words wouldn't come out. How do you tell someone their entire marriage is fake? Luckily, my aunt had no such hesitation. She took a deep breath and said, it's about your wife. Dad frowned. What about her? Another pause. Then, in the coldest, hardest voice I'd ever heard from her, my aunt said, she's been cheating on you for over a decade. She has another husband, Greg, and 2 kids. Silence. Not the kind where someone is processing bad news. The kind where the world just stops. Dad just stared. His expression didn't change. His breathing didn't change. Nothing. If I hadn't been looking directly at him, I wouldn't have even known he was alive. Then, finally, he blinked. Come again. I swallowed hard. It's true, Dad. My voice came out shaky. She's been with some guy named David for 15 years. I saw the messages. The pictures. She told me herself. Still, nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just emptiness. Then he let out a breath. Slow, measured. He nodded once, then leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You're sure? I almost laughed. Like this was some casual misunderstanding. Like I had just accused Mom of stealing a pack of gum, not maintaining a second goddamn family. Yes, my aunt said. We're sure. Another nod. Another slow breath. Then, finally, a reaction. He laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was hollow bitter, like he had just heard the punchline to some sick joke. He ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he muttered, that F *** king be *** tc. My aunt shot me a look like, here we go. Dad stood up abruptly, his whole body tense. Where is she? I tensed. She's at home. He nodded, jaw tight. I need a minute. I stepped forward. Dad. He held up a hand. I just need a minute. Then he walked outside. My dad was gone for 2 hours. I had no idea where he went. He didn't answer his phone, didn't text. My aunt tried to act calm, but I could tell she was worried too. Maybe he just needed to clear his head, she said. But there was an edge to her voice. We sat in silence, waiting. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from my mom. Nothing. She didn't know yet. She had no idea the bomb had gone off. When my dad finally came back, he was calm. Too calm. He walked in, grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down, and took a long sip. He didn't look at us right away. Just stared at the table, like he was calculating something. Then he finally spoke. I want to be the one to tell her I know. I blinked. Wait, what? I don't want her finding out through you, he said. I want to look her in the eyes when I say it. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. Greg, are you sure that's a good idea? He finally looked at us. His face was unreadable. She's my wife. He took another sip. I think I deserve that much. I wasn't sure if I agreed, but honestly, it wasn't my call anymore. He exhaled, rubbing his temple. She's been playing me for years. Let's see how well she lies to my face. I swallowed hard. When are you going to do it? Tonight. It took everything in me not to react. Tonight. As in, a few hours from now. This wasn't just some hypothetical anymore. T was about to get real. My aunt wasn't on board. Maybe you should take a day to process, Greg. Don't rush into this. No, he said firmly. I'm not waiting another damn second. She got 15 years of playing me. I get one night. We didn't argue after that. There was no point. So we just sat there, waiting for the storm to hit. My dad just left to confront her. I have no idea what's going to happen. But something tells me, it's not going to be pretty. I couldn't sit still. My dad had just left for the confrontation, and my stomach was in knots. My aunt tried to act calm, but I could tell she was just as tense. Neither of us knew what was happening at that house. Was my mom lying? Crying? Trying to manipulate him the way she tried to manipulate me? Or was she finally going to admit what she did? I didn't know how long it would take. 5 minutes. An hour. All night. I kept checking my phone, waiting for something. A text, a call, anything. Then, after about 40 minutes, I got a message. Dad, come over. Now. No explanation. Just that. I showed my aunt, and we both jumped up. The whole drive to the house, my mind was racing. Was he okay? Was she? Did he tell her everything already, or was he waiting for us? When we pulled into the driveway, my dad's car was there. The porch light was on. But the second I stepped out of the car, I heard it. Arguing. Muffled voices. Yelling. My aunt and I exchanged a look before rushing to the door. I didn't even knock. I just walked in. And there they were. My mom was standing in the middle of the living room, crying hysterically. My dad was standing a few feet away, his fists clenched at his sides. He wasn't yelling anymore, but he looked destroyed. His face was red, his eyes bloodshot. Like he had already screamed himself hoarse. The moment my mom saw me, her face twisted. You told him. Like she was the victim here. I felt my jaw tighten. Of course I did. She let out a strangled laugh. You had no right. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No right? Are you serious? You're the one who's been lying to us for 15 years. I was going to tell him, she screamed. My dad laughed. But it wasn't happy. It was the most bitter, broken sound I had ever heard. Really? When, exactly? After another decade. I was protecting you, she sobbed. Dad snapped. From what? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't have an answer. And that's when I saw it. She never thought this moment would actually come. In her mind, she had total control. She had convinced herself that no one would ever find out. That she could keep both families forever. But now, it was over. And she knew it. She turned to me, her eyes wild. You ruined everything. I just stared at her. No, Mom. You did. She broke down crying. My dad just stood there, silent, watching the woman he thought he knew fall apart. My aunt finally stepped forward. I think we're done here. Dad exhaled shakily. Yeah, we are. And then, just like that, it was over. At least, the conversation was. But the real damage, that was just beginning. The house felt hollow. The yelling had stopped, but something heavier replaced it. Silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. The kind that tells you that no matter what happens next, nothing will ever be the same. My mom had collapsed onto the couch, head in her hands, sobbing. My dad wasn't looking at her anymore. He was done. Without a word, he walked over to the entryway, grabbed his keys, and turned to face me and my aunt. His voice was eerily calm. I'm leaving. My mom's head snapped up. Greg, wait. He didn't. The door slammed behind him. My mom let out a choked sob, staring at the empty doorway like she could somehow will him to come back. Like she didn't understand what had just happened. She turned to me, her face streaked with tears. Go after him. Please. I just stared at her. She still didn't get it. Mom, I said slowly, he's never coming back. Her face twisted. No. No, he just needs time. He loves me. I laughed. Actually laughed. Are you serious? I stepped forward, my hands clenched into fists. You lied to him for 15 years. You built an entire other life behind his back. And now you think he's just going to come back home like nothing happened. She shook her head violently. He'll forgive me. He always does. And that's when I realized. She wasn't sorry. Not really. She wasn't devastated because she had ruined her marriage, because she had broken him. She was devastated because she had finally lost control. For the first time in 15 years, she didn't get to decide how this played out. Dad's done, I told her, my voice steady. You don't get to keep him, Mom. You don't get to have both. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her shoulders sagged, and she buried her face in her hands. I didn't feel bad for her. Not even a little. My aunt grabbed her coat. We're leaving. I nodded and turned for the door, but my mom's voice stopped me. Are you going to tell David? I turned back, narrowing my eyes. What? She sniffled. David doesn't know. If you tell him, I'll lose everything. There it was. Not I'm sorry. Not I deserve this. Just fear. Even now, she was still trying to control the damage. I held her gaze. Let her sit in it. Then I shrugged. I guess you'll find out. And with that, I walked out the door. So now, here's the question. Do I tell David? Because honestly, after everything she's done, I think she deserves to lose everything. That's the end. Or maybe it's just the beginning. Let me know what you think, guys. That's it for today's story. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more wild Reddit stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep the stories coming.